Please welcome to the stage GoAnimate City's favorite punk band, the Shy Guy Sleuths.
Can you feel life moving through your mind? Looks like it came back from more.
The atmosphere of the club that night was unlike any other gig we played beforehand. We felt like we were on top of the world.
If you were to ask me, I'd say that was our biggest concert at that point. Before, we were mostly playing high school gyms and rundown bars.
The East Side nightclub has a long history with GoAnimate City's music scene, and I was super excited when we could finally afford to play there.
Out of all the musicians everyone expects to see at East Side, I imagine a band deeply rooted in pop punk and new metal wouldn't make the list, but here we are.
It's a long way to the top if you wanna rock and roll, and the Shy Guy Sleuths are just one of those acts in that area.
Even though Dumbo is more of a metalhead than a punk rock fan, he enjoys listening to the Sleuths since he also likes new metal.
Like that said, I appreciate the Shy Guy Sleuths for doing their best to appeal to both punk and heavy metal fans.
All I can say that we're happy that our little cousin Chip found a profession that he can excel at.
Yeah, good luck out there, Chip, and just keep on rocking.
The beginning of the band goes to back my days when I was a rebellious teenage running wild and running free. But come to think about it, I remember little about my high school days since it's been many years, so I'll do my best to explain the following events. Basically, when I was about 16, my brother Colby and I were discussing plans for our lives before and after college. One day after class, I was talking with him about the different bands I listened to, and I remember saying that Green Day and Linkin Park were probably my favorites. The light bulb in Colby's head suddenly lit up and he told me that I should start a band since I already knew how to sing.
I mean, what else was I going to say to Chris? He only needed to recruit a few other friends as he had the voice within himself.
From there, I began scouting for musicians who could help me with setting up the band. That's when I met a drummer named Cole Alexander.
For me, drumming was just a side hobby to do during my free time. I never thought about joining a band until the day that I met up with Chris.
Obviously, every up-and-coming music act needs a decent drummer to succeed. Cole was great from the moment that I saw him first play while in his garage.
I was there that day for Cole's rehearsal, and that was one hell of a performance that he put on.
Chris and I spent some time figuring out what kind of guitarist would best suit us since we were aiming for a pop-punk style act. That's where my brother Chad came in.
I was skeptical about Chris's offer since I was more into all punk rock at the time. He later had me listen to some Green Day, and I immediately took the audition.
I knew Chad would have some difficulties with the pop-punk style I was aiming for with the band. After weeks of practice, he managed to kick some ass with his guitar work.
Nothing much happened after Chad joined, and we were mainly a trio that played small bars and nightclubs across GoAnimate City for the next few years.
Every musician has some bands that inspired them, and the Shy Guy Sleuths are no exception. Behind me, you can see some album covers of two well-known new metal bands that inspired our main lyrical style in our songs. And over here are the two bands that influenced the direction of musical style for us in the years ahead. I know you may be thinking that mixing punk, emo and new is a weird choice, but hey, every band wants their style to be unique. Now let's explore the Shy Guy Sleuths' early gigs and experiences before 2020.
After Chad and I were accepted into the band, it didn't take long for us to get booking for gigs across the city.
As anyone would expect, our earlier shows were rough from day one.
Like I mentioned earlier, the places where we placed our first concerts weren't so great.
The bars we performed at were often in the bad parts of town. Even if the gig was during peak happy hour, very few people paid attention to us.
And for the people who did watch us play, they booed and heckled us into oblivion. Admittedly, this was during a time where we played nothing but covers of various punk songs.
Like any other band that's just starting out, we barely got paid for our terrible performances. Chris most of time argued with the bar owner after the show.
Chris's excessive drinking before and after performances almost always got us kicked out, since he'd usually trash the bar while singing.
By the time the three of us moved into a cheap-to-rent house, we had gotten into multiple bar fights caused by Chris's lack of self-control. Cole and I thought of leaving the band.
One morning, I walked into Chris's room ready to bury him into the ground over his alcohol and drug-fueled issues when the unexpected happened. Tears immediately emerged from Chris's eyes the second I opened my mouth. That made me realize that he knew about his issues. He begged me and Chad not to leave the band since we were the only two people who could monitor his health 24/7. He also admitted he underestimated the impact of being a rock star. I backed down from what I was originally going to say and told Chris that the band could stay active as long as he went into rehab.
After about 3 months of rehab and testing, Chris finally broke free of his demons and became a straight-edged shy guy capable of singing again.
There were many more shenanigans that happened during the band's early years, but those are stories for another day.
Now back to you, Chris.
Finally, we'll skip ahead to around 2018 or 19, the time where we finally started writing our first original songs.
I was minding my own business back home when Colin Chat asked me to join the band. Chris was looking a sax player as he taking the band into a more pop-punk direction. The four of us spent our afternoons in the garage brainstorming ideas for our debut album, figuring out which songs would best fit in. Obviously, we threw many songs against the wall and Chris had severe writer's block. Eventually, we settled with most of Chat's songs and some additional writing credits from me and Cop. After several weeks of rehearsing, mixing and recording, we finally got a deal signed with a record label, setting the stage for the release of our self-titled debut album. Here's what the final version of the album would look like upon its release. Most of these songs differ from their earlier versions as we mapped out our ideas. Though the album wasn't a huge success when it was released, the song Grave Digger was praised for its fusion of rock zombie-style horror with punk's energy. Grave Digger became popular enough for the producers of GoAnimate City's Got Talent to invite us so we could perform the song live on TV. That performance eventually gave us enough exposure to establish ourselves as a force within the city's punk rock scene. We decided we would need to recruit a second guitarist.
Fast forward to the summer of 2020 when we finally found a supporting guitarist, 16-year-old Chip Alexander.
My dad Zealot wasn't too sure about me joining a band. After all, it was close to my senior year of high school and everyone was doing drugs or other illegal activities.
Since I grew up during the days of hippies and counterculture, it wasn't uncommon to see young adults smoke weed and get high on acid. I didn't want Chip to go down that path.
Dad was hard-pressed on me until I told him that hippie stuff was over 50 years ago by that point.
I knew I couldn't rely on decades-old cliches, so I had no choice but to say yes to Chip. Afterwards, when I first saw him play, good lord was he amazing.
That first rehearsal was all it took for Chris to hire me, though I had to take a supporting guitarist role since my style of playing is more in line with thrash metal. But I've also gotten some lead guitar playing roles, mainly for the band's more heavier, metal-like songs that we perform.
And that's where the Shy Guy Sleuths remain in 2024. We've embraced the idea of being a local band that plays nightclubs, gyms, and festivals. So as to not stress out, I would like to thank our fans for their dedication and support over the years. Goodbye, good night, and peace out, punks.